Welcome to my hip journey. This video documents my entire hip journey from about 9 months pre-op until 3 years post-op. Today, coincidentally, marks the 3-year anniversary of my total hip replacement, literally today. So welcome to the video, and as we get started, I wanted to start off with a message of hope. Hello, it's about 3 weeks after my total hip replacement, and I'm going for a walk today. I wanted to just let you know there is hope. And it's amazing that only 3 weeks into recovery, I've progressed this far already. I just wanted to say there is hope. So I am just past 6 months post-op, and today I am in Spain, and I completed day 1, about an 11-mile hike of the Camino Santiago. There is definitely hope. If you're watching this video now, it's probably because you're in pain, waiting for your total hip replacement, or perhaps you're already recovering from surgery. Well, either way, there is hope. I wanted to share some great resources if you haven't already checked them out. I've made it easy by including links in this video's description. My website, hipvlog.org, contains lots of helpful resources, including an email system that will send you timely tips and information directly to your inbox throughout your hip journey. So I hope you'll take a minute now to invest in your recovery by subscribing to my YouTube channel, website, and Facebook groups. If you like my content, please share it with others and check out my other YouTube channel, Game of Life 411. Who knows, we might have some other interests in common. Thanks for watching, and now back to the video. You might be wondering how similar my hip journey is to your hip journey. Well, every day I wake up and I respond to comments and questions on my YouTube channels, and then I go onto Facebook and I spend some time answering as many questions as I can and reading and learning from others' comments and posts. And what I've found is that about 80 or 90% of our hip journeys are the same, and then 10 or 20% are different. So while your situation might be a little bit different, you might be older, you might be younger, you might have some other physical issues going on, you might have waited longer than I did to have your surgery, we're going to go through the same stages. You might go through them faster or slower than me, but we're going to still go through the same stages, have the same milestones for the most part, and have the same experiences.
Hey Pete, Gary here. Only polite that I should introduce myself. Out for a little walk with my friend. I have a Lemmy the dog. I live in the east coast of Ireland, just south of the capital Dublin. 56, engineer, car guy like yourself. Ended up doing some triathlon in my 40s. Had hip problems from birth. A lot of repair work done in the 1970s when I was a kid. And finally, my hips are starting to give out now. So my left hip is absolutely toast, no cartilage at all. And has to go. So I've been working really hard in the gym. Lost all my fitness over the last couple of years as my hip got progressively worse and worse. I just couldn't exercise, and as you can imagine, I even started messing with my head because, you know, in my head I was still fit and able and well able to exercise, but it wasn't happening. So, and I can only imagine the benefit I will get now post-surgery from just being in good shape. Going into the operation should be fantastic. Interesting journey. Really looking forward to getting on the other side of onto the recovery side now. Petrified with fear with surgery, and taking great solace from all the work you've done, all the videos you've published now. They really are superb, and they kind of take a lot of the fear out of the whole process. So kudos to you for doing that. Happy New Year, and catch you soon. Nice talking to you.
Now, I've taken several other videos that I recorded along the way during my hip journey and compiled those into this video. I've added my insights from 2020 hindsight, having now been through this process and learned so much from others. I think it's also important to mention that when I had my hip surgery, my mother also had hip surgery about 6 months later, and she's 23 years older than me. So I've factored all that in, as well as everything I've learned interacting with others, literally thousands of other hippies going through this process. And most people get their lives back as a result. That said, I just want to remind everyone that I'm not a medical professional of any kind. I'm sharing my own experiences and things that I've learned from others. The best advice I can give you if you have your surgery date is to sign up for the Your Hip Journey email system. I've designed that system to provide timely tips, information, and encouragement directly to your inbox throughout your hip journey. And if you don't have your surgery date yet, then go ahead and sign up for the Helpful Hippie newsletter. Hey, in post-production, as we're putting this video together, I think we had a great idea, which is, since this video documents my hip journey, we'll insert samples from the Your Hip Journey email system along the way, sort of coinciding with my timeline. That way you can get a taste for what that system will provide you during your hip journey.
Hola Pete, hola Mike, it's Garry, your Ireland correspondent, checking in. 2 weeks and 2 days ahead of my surgery and my anxiety is gone. I can't explain why, other than I am getting your emails. I'm going through the really well curated lists of tasks, stuff that I need to do. I'm keeping on top of my exercise regime, and I'm following all the links to your videos, which are fantastic. And again, are just giving me really well curated lists of jobs I need to do. Possibly also give me a bit of a focus on stuff I need to do that has nothing really to do with the surgery, but is critical to get out of the way, because I'm going to be so useless for the weeks immediately after the surgery. Everything from just tidying up at home, getting the cars serviced, possibly a few little repairs and DIY jobs at home.
This is a fairly long video, but I wanted to let you know that I've really been putting a lot of effort into adding value to it. I didn't just take some old video clips and cobble them together and slap it up there on YouTube. What I've done is I've spent already 2 weeks going through those old videos, pulling together the relevant parts to build a complete picture of my hip journey from front to end. And then I've tried to answer some important questions. And as I often do, I went onto Facebook and I asked other hippies what sort of questions they would have. In this video, I'll answer a lot of questions, including the following. When did I get back on a bike? When can I tackle a big adventure like hiking the Camino Santiago? Will I have to discontinue all my medications 2 weeks before my surgery? Can I tackle a big adventure like a hike before my surgery with a bad hip? Does complete healing from total hip replacement take 6 weeks or 9 months? What is the number one best PT exercise after total hip replacement? How and when can I drive my car or my tiny little sports car? And then there are these questions that hippies on the forums ask me. Is your hip pain completely gone? How long did you still have groin pain after your total hip replacement? Are there still movements that are difficult? Is your walking stride normal? What about leg length discrepancy? Is that an issue, or was it? If you had any referred pain in your knee pre-op, did that get resolved with your total hip replacement? So this is not all the questions I'm going to address, but just a sample. And if you're interested, I'll try to include as many of those as possible in the video description. There is hope. Keep a positive attitude. Keep plugging away. Things will get better. Starting in early 2022, I experienced pain in my left knee and then later in my right hip. And the right hip ended up being very painful, to where I felt pain both in the hip joint and also radiating all the way down my inner thigh to my knee. And it was sort of a sharp and burning pain. The period 3 to 9 months pre-op for me was very frustrating, because during that 6-month period, I didn't really know that I had a bad hip. I had a lot of pain in my groin and in my knee and sort of down my leg, but it wasn't really pronounced in my hip. And so I was trying everything and nothing was making it better. And I was really suffering. I was not sleeping well. It was affecting all my physical activity. So I was worried about staying fit and active and really seriously impacting my life. So once I got it diagnosed, and that took an X-ray and then subsequently an MRI, what the doctor told me was that oftentimes we don't feel a bad hip in the hip joint. We can feel it in other places in other ways. And in my case, what was happening was my femoral nerve was passing through the hip joint, getting inflamed because my hip joint was inflamed due to the arthritis and damage to the cartilage and things like that. And it was sending phantom pain signals to other parts of my body, which I felt then again in my groin and in my knee and things like that. So that kind of complicated the diagnosis process and why I suffered sort of mysteriously for those 6 months. So I just wanted to share that in case you're not quite sure whether your pain is from your hip or not. It can be tricky to figure this out. To recap my diagnosis, my doctors at this point have said that I can do just about any activity so long as I can handle the pain. And whenever the pain is unbearable, that's when I need to have my hip replacement, which is currently scheduled for next January.
Regardless of what activities I engage in, my hip has already deteriorated to the point where I'm going to need a total hip replacement. So the doctor tells me that activity is good, it keeps blood flowing from my joints, and helps maintain joint mobility and my overall fitness level. When it comes to handling pain, I can usually handle it during the day, but the problem becomes getting a good night's sleep. So that's the challenge I face.
At this appointment, the doctor did take x-rays of my hip, and he could see that there was some damage there, but he wasn't sure that it rose to the level of needing a total hip replacement. Nevertheless, he did offer me a steroid shot, and he gave me one. And unfortunately, that really didn't help me. I know some folks receive relief from those steroid injections, and they can get them, a few times over a course of several years, and it can help them prolong their functional use and delay their surgery. But it didn't help me at all. And it does delay your surgery because they will not perform surgery within 3 months of having one of those steroid injections. So just something to bear in mind. This is me waiting for an MRI to confirm that I needed total hip replacement. When I had my initial consultation in October, the doctor took x-rays, and he wasn't sure that I really needed total hip replacement based on those. But I was pretty sure, so I asked him to pencil in a surgery date. I didn't want to wait or delay any further, and then he scheduled me for an MRI the following month. Sure enough, the MRI confirmed that I needed a total hip replacement, and I sure was glad that I'd asked him to schedule me already. Here's a question. Can I tackle a big adventure, like a big hiking trip, pre-op with a bad hip? In my case, what happened is my friend Fernando is from Peru, and he said, "Hey, Pete, would you like to go hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu?" This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and something that I'd had on my bucket list for at least 10 years. Just 2 months before my total hip replacement, a buddy of mine presented me with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. And this is no ordinary hike. It's 5 days and 4 nights. You're camping in a tent. It's 26 total miles with a ton of elevation change. The average elevation is 10,000 feet above sea level, where you have about 30% less oxygen than at sea level. Well, I wasn't sure, but I talked to my surgeon, and with his blessing, I went ahead and took the trip. He said, "Your hip is going to be replaced, so you can't really do more damage there. As long as you can manage the pain, then go for it." And I did. And some folks have questioned the wisdom of this. They've questioned whether it was fair to the other hikers and things like that. So I've done a couple other adventure hikes previously in my life, and I know that these outfits are prepared for hikers of all ages and abilities. And I've been on hikes with very elderly folks, and so they are set up to handle that and to make sure that everyone still can have a good experience. So I wasn't too worried about that. As it turns out, I was not the limiting factor in our hike group. There was actually a young lady, I think she was only in her 30s, fairly fit, but the elevation zonked her. And we had to delay, and she had to have assistance. And so she was the limiting factor in our hike, not me. So the answer to that question in my case was yes. But I think every case is going to be individual, and you should definitely discuss it with your surgeon.
Hiking the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu was an awesome experience that I'd highly recommend to anyone. It's probably worth taking a moment to talk about my overall philosophy on health and fitness, especially when I'm anticipating total hip replacement surgery. When I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my right hip, basically I felt like I had two choices. The first choice was to take prescription medications to control the pain and inflammation and put off the surgery as long as possible. The problem with this approach is that over time I'm going to become less and less fit, which will make my recovery that much more difficult and take that much longer. The second choice, the one that I prefer, is to schedule the surgery as soon as possible while I'm still relatively fit. Hopefully this will help me come out of surgery better and recover more quickly and more completely. My long-term goal, of course, is to recover fully from the hip replacement surgery and then return to a fully active life doing all the things I love, but especially beach volleyball. During this first week of training for the Inca Trail, I met with a new surgeon, started doing upper body weights and my physical therapy for the hip, and it was also characterized by very poor sleep. Still trying to figure that out.
Training hike 2 miles to the top of Elk Knob near Boone and 2 miles back.
This week I continued to train for the Inca Trail and also met with my primary care physician for my annual. Just coincidentally, the timing of that fell in this period, and that was very helpful. He told me to try some different things with over-the-counter pain meds, which really helped my sleep. Basically, he told me at dinner time to take some ibuprofen, then at bedtime to take acetaminophen along with the meloxicam. And as long as I take a sleep aid with that, I'm able to get okay sleep. But I don't like taking quite so many medications.
Last Wednesday, 2 days ago, I played volleyball in the morning and felt okay. And then in the afternoon, I went for a 2 to 3 mile hike with my son. And after that, in the evening, I was just in excruciating pain. So evidently, that was too much for my hip. And I feel better today, but boy, I tell you, Wednesday night was misery.
Week 3 is my final week of training for the Inca Trail. At the beginning of the week, we were at home doing regular exercise. I tried switching to diclofenac again, but had the muscle spasms again, so went right back to meloxicam. During the last part of the week, we spent 4 days at the beach with friends, and so my exercise at that time was just walking along the beach for several miles each day. Monday, I fly out to Peru to hike the Inca Trail.
The hiking went well. It was a moderately strenuous day, so everything worked fine with the hip, no problems. However, when we went to bed, I took all my meds as usual, and once I laid down, the pain in my hip and radiating all the way down through my inner thigh and right knee was excruciating, just throbbing pain. I really didn't get any sleep last night. We'll see how it goes tonight. But today is supposed to be our hardest day of the trek. It's almost 10 miles. Lots of elevation change, potentially cooler, maybe some rain, hopefully not. We had beautiful weather yesterday. It was a little hot perhaps, very sunny. Anyhow, more later. Hi there. Day 2 of our hike, the Inca Trail. I think we're about 2/3 of the way through it. This is by far the hardest day. It's been pretty rough. We did have a pretty nice lunch break and a little siesta afterwards, but it'll be interesting to see how sore I am tonight and how the hip feels. I did take some meds a couple hours ago, trying to get ahead of the curve on that, so that I don't have as much pain when I try to turn in for the night. Okay, second night in the tent was a lot better. Yesterday was by far the hardest hiking day. Today should be relatively easy, but I started taking painkillers earlier in the afternoon, including the meloxicam. I took like a half of meloxicam around 5 or something like that, and then I took another full one, so a little more than I'm supposed to take, but I really needed to get some sleep. And then with all the other over-the-counter stuff, it made a difference. So I got a decent night's sleep last night, and looking forward to some good hiking today. Okay, we just arrived at Machu Picchu, and last night was a pretty good sleep. I think I've learned from my lessons. I think the first night I just didn't take my medications early enough because I was in pain when I went to bed, which was fairly early. And the last couple nights I've been starting my meds earlier in the day. But bottom line is I'm taking everything I have. So I'm taking ibuprofen, Tylenol, meloxicam, and occasionally some oxycodone just to be able to sleep. So everything's working well, and I'm glad to see that. Well, we're officially done with the Inca Trail. Slept pretty well, again taking all of my medications and anti-inflammatories and things like that. I'm really glad that on the Inca Trail I was able to figure that out and not have any problems. And my legs feel good, my hip feels pretty good. Everybody's been joking about how they have these really well-developed quads and calves and things after this hike because there was a lot of stair climbing. This is like stair climber on steroids.
There you go, Peter. The coca leaves are speaking.
Nice. It's long legs.
Long legs and coca leaves.
And short legs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Done. 3, 2. It's also worth mentioning that using the walking sticks was fabulous. They were so helpful going both upstairs or uphill and downhill or downstairs. This particular trail actually had a lot of stairs because it's the Inca Trail, and one of the things that they did was carve stairs into the mountainside or put them together with rocks. I learned something on the trek that I didn't know, which is
When you are walking uphill, you want to adjust them to be shorter. That's easier to get in front of you. And when you're going downhill, then you want them long so you can reach in front of you. But, again, highly recommend them. Super, super helpful.
This was Mike's reaction when he learned that I was going to have total hip replacement. I melted my favorite Crocs that day, but one mustn't disturb Mike. We continued with a busy life all through December, trying to cram in as much as possible before my surgery in January. That included a trip to visit my sister and my parents. Little did I know that my mother would be having hip surgery 9 months after me, a track day with some friends at the Virginia International Raceway, and a trip to Spain to visit my mother-in-law. Airplane seats are always uncomfortable for me, but this was a particularly bad trip.
The 10 days prior to surgery, a lot of stuff going on during these days. If you have a tip that really helped you in your total hip replacement, please let me know in the comments. I wish you all the best of luck with your total hip replacement and recovery. My plan is to do a journal entry each day for the next 10 days up until surgery. Just got out of my pre-op visit. I am scheduled for surgery in less than 10 days. They gave me these crutches. I'm not sure how I'm gonna fit them in my car. Not even close. So they'll be joining me in the passenger seat. Okay, today is 10 days until my hip replacement surgery, and I decided to play volleyball today. It was a pretty good day. I had a good time. I am in quite a bit of pain, but I'm taking, NSAIDs and icing and things like that to try and keep things under control. So hopefully I'll be okay tonight. Okay, it's 9 days until surgery, and I'm on my Concept 2 bike erg for about 20 minutes. I like doing this while I'm watching one of my favorite shows, Family Guy. This is just to try and keep my joints moving, blood flowing, muscles strong, so that after surgery I can continue with rehab using this same stationary bike. We actually are going to a wedding in South Carolina, so that's a 4-hour drive each way, total about 8 or 9 hours in the car. That's going to be interesting. Yesterday I played volleyball and I did not sleep well last night. A lot of pain. I'm kind of surprised. If you'd asked me a couple months ago whether or not I needed the surgery or could put it off, once I had been taking the prescription meloxicam anti-inflammatories, I felt pretty good. And I'd even considered putting things off. But as the last couple months have progressed, pain has come back. And if I want to remain active in any sort of way, the surgery has to happen. So I think it's a good thing. I'm still scheduled for surgery.
If you're having second thoughts about whether or not to have total hip replacement surgery, then I did want to add a word of caution. So my mom, as I mentioned earlier, also had hip surgery about 6 months after me. And her scenario was a little bit different. She kind of fell prey to this mindset. She had seen a doctor. She was in a lot of pain. They had diagnosed her as needing hip replacement surgery, and she really didn't want it. So she put it off and said, I'll just live with the pain. I just really don't want the surgery. Well, what happened was just a couple months later, the pain level went through the roof. And she was just, beside herself in pain and wanted hip surgery that day. Well, it doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, she had to suffer for a while until we were able to get her scheduled for surgery. So I just wanted to caution you about that. The pain will ebb and flow, but if the damage is done, then, you might want to think twice about rescheduling or canceling your surgery. I'm dressed up this nicely because we're going to a wedding in South Carolina. I did have x-rays yesterday at my preoperative appointment, and the notes from the x-rays sounded like it had progressed and gotten worse. It mentioned bone on bone, which had not been mentioned after my first x-rays 3 months ago. So it's possible hiking that Inca Trail helped wear things down further, but other than complete inactivity, I think it's inevitable that it's going to keep wearing now that there's all the cartilage damage and bony growth. So I'm still confident in my plan, which is to have the surgery now while I'm still fit. Hopefully that will optimize my recovery so I can get back to all the activities that I love. 8 days until surgery, and I'm getting in one last hike. I actually was kind of surprised. This is the first time I'm going hiking since I hiked the Inca Trail back in mid-November. So glad I'm able to do this. I'm going with my regular hiking buddy, Chris. Okay, 1 week till surgery. I'm out here catching some last-minute volleyball with some friends, and weather's beautiful, a little chilly, but very nice.
When I got fitted for crutches last week, they said one of the things I should do before surgery is practice walking with the crutches every day. And I kind of skipped it for a few days because we were so busy. We had a wedding and other things. But last night I started practicing, and I'm glad that they suggested that because it's a little tricky, but I think with practice I'll get used to it. I can walk around fine with it. I can go up and down stairs well, although very slowly. But the part I'm having a challenge with is opening and closing doors. So I'll have to practice that more.
I want to emphasize here the importance of practicing the things that you'll have to do post-op. I can't emphasize this enough, and it applies to so many things. Really try to put yourself in the mindset of someone who has a hip that they cannot bend, that is in a lot of pain, and try to go through your daily activities. So using the crutches is a good example. Getting up and down off of the toilet is another one. Getting into bed without using your leg at all. These are all things that are pretty tricky. And in addition to that, what I would say is make sure to do a little bit of upper body strengthening, because you will be amazed how much you have to use your arms when your leg is not working. And, even though I was pretty fit, I found myself straining and it was a bit of a struggle. So word to the wise.
Hi, good morning. This is Mike the cat. He's my emotional support cat. Not really, but it does put a nice smile on my face whenever he cuddles and purrs. Unfortunately, it's 2 a.m. and I'm awake. And he's especially affectionate early in the morning. I get lucky in that respect because of our family. I'm always the one who's up the earliest by far. The reason I'm up at 2 a.m. today is because I played volleyball yesterday and I guess the pain was just too much. Typically I can handle the pain and whatnot during the day, but at night it's hard to get a good night's sleep. The pain will wake me up and then I really can't get back to sleep. So I was a little surprised because I did so much yesterday to try and manage the pain. Migraine relief or headache relief, it's a combination of acetaminophen, aspirin, and caffeine. And the caffeine aids in the absorption of those other meds for the pain relief and anti-inflammatory properties. So yesterday I did take that before I played volleyball. So then when I got home at 2 p.m. I iced it. I have a very large ice pack that's meant for wrapping around your hip. And so I put that on there for probably 30-40 minutes to numb it. This is all, again, just being proactive, trying to avoid future pain. After the icing, then I applied Tiger Balm, because another friend of mine who has had hip replacement said that's one of the things that he used to manage pain. He said by putting Tiger Balm on that area that it would numb it and help him out. So I tried Tiger Balm. Then after dinner, I took 4 ibuprofen, which is double the normal dosage. This is what my primary physician had suggested I do to help manage pain. And then before bed, I iced my hip again for 30-40 minutes. And then I took my meloxicam and I took a half of an oxycodone and went to bed. And I was able to get to bed okay, about 11 o'clock. But then I woke up about 1 in some pretty significant pain. And I took another half of an oxycodone. I took 1 Tylenol and 1 Tylenol PM, which has diphenhydramine, which is sort of a sleep aid, and basically laid in bed for about an hour trying to fall back asleep and failed. So I'm here awake and recording this video for you.
Here's a tip. Narcotics can give some people insomnia, and I'm one of those people. So if you're trying to use them to help you get a good night's sleep, just bear this in mind. They actually were counterproductive for me.
So today is day 6 before surgery, so 6 days until surgery. And I had a few things that I wanted to share with you in addition to what I just shared. So first off, I've been looking at some of the recommendations for discontinuing medications prior to surgery. So I'd received a letter from the hospital saying stop using all non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the NSAIDs, like ibuprofen or meloxicam, 10 days before surgery. That scared me. So when I had my pre-op appointment with the physician's assistant, I asked him about it. He said, no, 7 days is adequate. That still kind of scares me because I remember how much pain I was in. And if I'm discontinuing all those meds, I'm just really concerned that I'm gonna be a wreck by the time I go into surgery, having had no sleep for a week.
This can be really important for people who rely on medications to treat other medical conditions. So don't be afraid to ask your surgeon and have him explain to you exactly why you need to discontinue a particular medication, especially if it's one you really rely on.
So I did a little bit of independent research yesterday to understand why they recommend discontinuing these drugs. And they always say it's because of bleeding risk, right? And so I wanted to understand that. And I found some studies that talked about it in more detail. And evidently what's happening is when you're using an NSAID, whether it's aspirin or ibuprofen, it is messing with elements of your platelets. And the platelets in your blood are what form clots. So if you don't form clots effectively, then you can bleed out. However, what I also found was that the different medications have different effects of different durations. So for example, aspirin appears to be the worst because the effect it has on platelets is irreversible, and it takes about 7 to 10 days for your body to completely recycle through platelets. So basically it absorbs all the old platelets and creates new platelets. So in essence, the effect of aspirin is at least 7 days, up to 10 days. But when you look at other NSAIDs like ibuprofen, it only has an effect for about 1 day. So that tells me that I don't need to discontinue something like ibuprofen 7 days in advance of my surgery. Now that said, I want to make it very clear, I'm not a medical professional and this is not medical advice. I'm just sharing what I've learned and what I personally am going to do. So as I said, hospital said 10 days. The physician's assistant who works with my surgeon recommended 7 days. After doing the research, I'm definitely going to discontinue aspirin, but I am going to continue taking some of the other medications like the ibuprofen and the meloxicam until about 5 days before surgery, which will be tomorrow. And I have one more volleyball event tomorrow. Based on how much pain I was in last night and yesterday, I'm a little worried about that, but I really want to get that in as my last one for several months. At any rate, that's my plan.
Okay, it's 5 days till surgery. I'm out playing volleyball for the last time before surgery. And last night I was in bed about 9 or 10 hours, only because I took tramadol, but I needed that sleep after sleeping only 3 hours the previous night. Hey, how do you like the fashion-forward headband? John McEnroe, 1970s. So today I'm starting to taper off all the medications. I did not take the migraine relief before volleyball today. Instead, I just took acetaminophen, which is okay. Yesterday was a great day. I had a great night's sleep. I got to play volleyball in the morning. Not only that, I won 5 out of the 6 matches with 3 different partners. I was king of the beach. That doesn't happen all the time, so that's a really nice feeling. That'll give me something to think about and set my sights on to help me recover faster and be more diligent about what I need to do to get back in the sand. I also got a massage and fixed my wife's recliner. So all in all, a very good day. So I've been getting a lot of questions, especially like when I'm out playing volleyball. People are saying, I had no idea you were scheduled for hip replacement surgery. How is it you're still able to play? And how long is your recovery going to be? Well, these are all difficult questions to answer, and I keep telling them it depends. I don't think that I can answer specifically until I actually get through surgery and start going through the recovery process. It sounds like recovery can vary a lot depending upon your individual circumstances and how successful your surgery is. But I feel very confident in the surgeon I've chosen and the approach that he's going to be taking to my hip replacement. So the best thing I can tell people is it depends. I know that for the first 2 weeks, I'm just going to be resting and letting my body heal from surgery. And after that, I'm guessing it's going to be a couple months before I can really get back on the courts and play volleyball. Although I told people that I'll still come out and maybe pepper with them a little bit. Anything that's calm and where I'm not going to react without thinking and accidentally do something that I probably shouldn't. But regardless of how long my recovery takes, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it's successful and as rapid as possible.
Good morning. Today it's 3 days until surgery. I'm a little disappointed that Mike the cat's not here to snuggle with me. Yesterday was a weird day. So I started out the day with a 20-minute stationary bike ride, and that went well. I went through the day. I was spending a lot of time actually creating video content yesterday. I had to go pick up my Lotus at the shop, so that was about an hour worth of driving. And then again in the afternoon, I was working on YouTube content. About dinner time, 5 or 6 p.m., I started to lose focus. I was trying to edit my videos, but I just was getting distracted and not able to focus, and it was the pain. So throughout the entire day yesterday, I didn't have a lot of pain. I felt pretty good. I didn't have to take any medications during the day yesterday. And then, like I said, around dinner time, it was really starting to bug me. And I had guests coming over after dinner to play cards. So I took a couple of acetaminophen, which is really the only medication I should be taking at this point, 3 days out from surgery. And that, I guess, took the edge off. Then I went to bed around 10 o'clock and took half of a tramadol. I was able to get to sleep okay, but then I woke up 2 hours later and already in some pain. So I took the other half of the tramadol and I took a Tylenol PM, which is again acetaminophen plus diphenhydramine to help you sleep, and tried to get some sleep. And it was fitful. It was a fitful night. I got an okay amount of sleep, but it wasn't great quality sleep. It was interrupted a lot, and I was still in pain. So I don't know what's going on, to be honest with you. The other thing that I've noticed is my left elbow, which has not really caused me any problems ever, has been hurting more lately. And they say that that is one of the side effects of coming off of the NSAIDs, that you may feel pain and aches in other joints. So that's not very welcome. I don't really like that. So at any rate, yesterday was a weird day. Didn't get a super night's sleep. Today hopefully will be a better day. Today I have to go in for my preoperative COVID test at the local hospital. And tonight we're going to play cards with 2 other couples. So hopefully tonight will be a little bit better. I've got a very busy weekend planned. We have a Settlers of Catan tournament on Saturday, and then my son and I are going to drive to our beach house 3 hours to assemble a triple bunk bed and then install that. And then Sunday we're going to finish that up, and we're going to drive back to Raleigh another 3 hours. And then Sunday I have another gaming event with some friends in the evening. So right before surgery. Yeah, right before surgery. So a lot of stuff going on this weekend. I wanted to let you know the reason I've been telling you about all these things that I'm doing. I'm keeping very busy lately because honestly, it's a blessing to keep my mind occupied so I'm not just worrying about surgery and stressing out about it. Today, by the way, I'm going to take it easy. I decided not to do anything on the bike erg. That was really the only thing that I was planning on doing exercise-wise. Otherwise, I just wanted to take it easy and let my body kind of relax and prepare for surgery.
It's 2 days until surgery, and I'm getting ready to do another workout on the bike erg. I also wanted to share with you today my philosophy on blood flow. So it's probably not unique to me, but I've always kind of thought that having good blood flow in your body was good for all kinds of things. If you think about injuries to tendons and ligaments, typically when I'm talking to a doctor about those, they're always telling me how there's poor blood flow to those areas, which makes it difficult for them to heal. So this is one of the reasons why I like aerobic activity. So hopefully after surgery, I'll have better blood flow to the areas around the hip and faster healing. Since I have discontinued the meloxicam for several days now, I can really feel the difference in my hip pain. It's pretty persistent now, so I've started to take the acetaminophen, which is the only pain reliever that I'm allowed to take before surgery. So I've been taking that a little bit more regularly. Today, for example, I did not have to take it first thing in the morning, but starting about lunchtime, I started taking it so that I would be able to think clearly and participate in the Catan tournament and then drive safely out here 3 hours to the beach. I should also mention that I have been practicing with my crutches every day in hopes that that will pay off and make it easier to use them when I come home after surgery.
Okay, 1 day until surgery, and we're driving back from our beach house to Raleigh, about a 3-hour drive. I'm sitting here with my hip aching, and I really don't know what to do about the pain. I'm taking acetaminophen, which is pretty much all I'm allowed. At night, I'm taking tramadol, and that seems to knock me out for sleep for a couple hours, but then I wake up 2 or 3 hours later with, again, pain in my hip. And last night, after I woke up, I took some Tylenol PM, which has acetaminophen and diphenhydramine. And after a couple more hours, then the pain seems to subside. So I don't know what's causing it and what works. But at any rate, we had a productive trip. We built a triple bunk at our beach house, and it worked out well. The road's a little bumpy right now. I guess they've been doing a lot of construction. Hey, everybody. I've got Mike, the support cat, again. I just got home. It's the night before my surgery. It's about 9:30, and I'm just home getting ready. I had to call it an early night. A couple things about surgery. First off, I'm pretty nervous about it. I'm not nervous about the hip replacement per se, but what I'm nervous about is being put under anesthesia. And admittedly, it's a little bit of irrational fear. When I was young, my grandmother had a little Yorkshire Terrier who had to have some surgery done, and they put him under anesthesia and he never came out. So I know that it's irrational because that's like a little 6 or 7 pound dog, and it would be easy to miscalculate the anesthesia. Plus, I'm sure they don't pay nearly as close attention with a little dog as they would with humans. So I know that's irrational probably, but still, that's the kind of stuff that worries me because if you go too far under anesthesia, oh, Mike wants to get down,
or if you have a bad reaction, then your heart can stop, your breathing can stop, and that can end your life. So that does make me a little nervous, and that's part of why I've been trying to keep myself, my mind occupied and myself busy. So anyhow, I did want to share a couple other things with you. I'm about to go upstairs and take a shower. It's interesting, they have all these precautions. Two things that they want you to do right before you go in for surgery. Number one is they gave me these special disinfecting wash sponges. So I'm supposed to take a shower, and then I'm supposed to wash all over my body and scrub with these disinfecting sponges to try and get rid of as many germs and bacteria as possible. I changed the bed sheets, so I'm sleeping on clean bed sheets. I'm supposed to wear clean pajamas, everything clean, 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 to minimize the germs on my body, which in theory will minimize the possibility of infection during surgery. And then tomorrow morning, I'm supposed to do the same thing. I'm supposed to wash again with all of that, with that disinfecting scrub, and then put on nice, clean, loose-fitting clothes, go to the hospital. I'm supposed to be there by 7:30 a.m. I think the surgery, so I think what they told me is when I go in, it's about an hour, hour and a half for prep, then about an hour, hour and a half for the surgery, and then about an hour to come out of the surgery. So that's, I think, what I'm looking at tomorrow. The other thing they gave me were these carbohydrate drinks. So it looks kind of like a Gatorade or it's not colored, it's clear. It looks kind of like a electrolyte solution or something. And they give me one that they want me to take now right before bed. And they give me another one that they want me to take tomorrow morning, at least 2 hours before surgery. And the idea is that if I get all these good carbohydrates and things going in my body, that should help me recover better from the surgery. So those are things that I'd never seen before. I also wanted to share with you, I think my surgeon really has his act together. After I had my pre-op visit about 10, 12 days ago, they had me sign up for an automated text system that sends me texts every day. One, usually 2, 3 some days. And so I'll just read you the last text. Okay, so it says, last message today, smiley face. When you head to the hospital tomorrow, try to wear soft and loose clothes that can be easily put on and taken off. Please remember to do your scrub care wash tonight and tomorrow morning. Lastly, try to relax tonight. Dr. K specializes in this type of surgery. You're in good hands. So lots of good tips. And it's just sort of a nice way to have things organized. I feel like they really have their act together. It gives me a lot of confidence in my surgeon and that I'm going to have a good outcome.
My surgeon's text-based system was absolute genius, and I really appreciate it. But not every surgeon has a system like this, so I built the Your Hip Journey email system to provide timely tips, information, and encouragement throughout your hip journey. So if you have a surgery date, go ahead and sign up for Your Hip Journey. You'll be glad you did.
This is probably the last content that I'm going to record for this video of the 10 days leading up to surgery. And the next thing you'll hear from me is after surgery.
If you like this or find it helpful, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and comment. I wish you all the best of luck with your total hip replacement and recovery.
It's 2 a.m. on the day of surgery, and I'm too nervous to sleep and just too uncomfortable. So I'm going to see if I can wrap up this video and get it published. In about 5 hours, I'll be leaving for the hospital, and about 2 hours after that, I'll be under the knife. I truly hope this video is helpful to others facing total hip replacement.
All checked in and ready for my surgery. Got my IV in. They've taken blood. And anyhow, I guess I'm ready for total hip replacement. Sure hope everything goes smoothly.
If you'd like to learn more about my surgery day and the critical first week post-op, please watch these 2 videos. Many folks facing total hip replacement are afraid. They're nervous, they're anxious. And I've been told by many, many hippies that watching these 2 videos actually helps alleviate some of their fears. So if you're nervous about surgery, please watch these videos. The first week after total hip replacement can be rough for a lot of us. I did a ton of research and I thought I was prepared, but there were still a bunch of things that surprised me the first week after surgery. Since this video covers my recovery from total hip replacement for 1 full year, I'll take opportunities to compare things throughout that time frame. So for example, here is my incision at various stages in the healing process, and then finally at 1 year post-op.
Hey Pete, it's Garry from Ireland checking in on day 1 after my total hip replacement. So I'm in the town of Hulm, just outside Dusseldorf in Germany, and yesterday I had a robotic assisted total hip replacement on the left side. Everything went absolutely according to plan and means that my recovery should be standard. No extra precautions or anything like that. Pain-wise, not too bad today. The nurses told me yesterday that today would be possibly the most painful day. I was very sore when I came out of the procedure, and the pain abated a little bit over the course of yesterday. I was up on my feet within 6 hours of the surgery. According to the surgeon, he's perfectly happy that the prosthetic has fixed correctly. I have a couple of screws in the socket just for security. So he's perfectly happy. He told me I'm able to load bear on the joint straight away, so that's good news. The pain kind of abated during the course of the day. They gave me an oxy tablet, which is a synthetic opiate, last evening, and I wasn't able to sleep. I had a few cat naps. Sorry, Mike, but yeah, I had a couple of cat naps last night. That was as good as it got. Some walking around today, and everything seems to be all right. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on the pain front today. I would rate it at between 2 and 3 out of 10 at the moment, which is very good. And I have, like I say, I've had some physiotherapy already, so I have some exercises to do, and I've started walking the corridors in the hospital here. So for the moment, I'm going to check out, and yeah, all good, pain low, everything good, and as they say in Germany, alles gut. Auf Wiedersehen.
More like this. So the crutches are always supporting the operative leg.
Good morning, Pete. It's Garry from Ireland, checking in from Krefeld in Germany. All good. Day 2 after my total hip replacement. Properly dressed today, as you can see. Doing a little bit of marching up and down the corridor just to get some miles up on my new hip. Possibly walked a little bit too far yesterday because I had a bit of pain last night. I was glad to get my oxycodone this morning. A little bit of relief. No problem so far. I kind of expected day 1 to be a little bit more painful than it was. Day 2 is not too bad so far. I'm going to keep chopping along here and see how we go. Really appreciate all the help you're giving us, guys, so thanks again.
So 5 days after a total hip replacement, and just transitioned to going with one crutch.
A big part of recovering from total hip replacement is just walking. And a lot of folks want to see if they're walking enough or walking too much. They might have some aches and pains and they're wondering, did they overdo it? I recorded my walking progress in great detail.
It's the Saturday after surgery, and I just completed my 3rd walk of the day. It's about noon. So I switched to one crutch, and so far these short walks have been great. In other milestones, today I also undressed, showered, and dressed by myself. I've been showering by myself, but my wife has been helping with the dressing and undressing part. But she's out of town today celebrating her birthday. And so rather than embarrass myself and my son, I undressed myself before showering, showered, and then dressed myself all by myself. In other big news, in other milestones, I should say, I had my first real bowel movement today. So thank goodness. That's a very important milestone. Prior to today, I'd only had what I like to call rabbit droppings. So this was a welcome event.
Hey Pete, it's Garry here, checking in on what is now day 5 after my total hip replacement in Krefeld in Germany. Things are going really, really well. I'm going to confirm an awful lot of what you've told us in your vlog and videos and on your blog site. Really, I'm going to be validating so much of the information that you've given us. So what can I confirm at this stage? The first couple of days are the most uncomfortable. They're not painful, they're just uncomfortable. Secondly, I can confirm that the pain control that the doctors can offer you is fantastic. Ask for it, it does work. I have been on oxycodone for a few days. It really, really does put the pain out of your mind, allows you to move on. With regard to sleep, the first couple of days I hardly slept at all. I'm going to bring Mike into this again. A few cat naps was about as good as it got. Third night, I started to sleep a little bit more as the swelling went down slightly, but wasn't sleeping at all well. Next thing I can confirm, fatigue. Yes, after 3 or 4 days, the fatigue becomes overwhelming. I couldn't keep my eyes open then. So for the last 2 days, it's been difficult to stay awake. Whatever about staying asleep, it's been difficult to stay awake. And I'm standing here now, no crutches, on my own 2 feet, zero pain. And this afternoon, I go for my first physiotherapy session proper. Recovery really fast, faster than I ever thought. Pain way less than I ever thought, and just these guys, they have it so well sewn up at this stage. They really know what they're doing. It's been a walk in the park for me. Really enjoying keeping in touch, and I'll let you know how I get on after I've tried the physio.
Had another big milestone today. I was able to go to church and even kneel for communion. So I wasn't sure it was going to happen, but I was up early enough and was able to get ready, and everything went pretty smoothly.
During the first week of my recovery, my operative thigh was in a lot of pain. And the best way I could describe it is that it just burned. It burned and was sort of, the muscle felt stiff. It was just super, super, super uncomfortable. And I'm a big believer in massage, and I have someone that I go to fairly regularly and trust. So at about 10 days post-op, I went and paid a visit to my trusted masseuse, and I asked her to work on that quad muscle. But I also asked her to be very careful not to manipulate my hip joint in any way, because I was very early post-op and healing, and I didn't want to risk any other damage. So she just focused and worked on that muscle. And I got to tell you, it hurt like crazy, but the very next day it felt so much better. Now, I don't want to just blanket recommend you get a deep tissue massage after total hip replacement, but it's something to consider if you have a trusted masseuse and under certain circumstances. You might want to double check with your surgeon.
Hey Pete, it's Garry checking in on day 7 after my total hip replacement. Enjoying some beautiful winter sunshine here close to Dusseldorf in Germany. What can I say after a week? To all your listeners, all your viewers, anyone who follows you on your blog site, just do it. I can't get over how fast my recovery has been this week. I had a little bit of pain and discomfort the first couple of days. In retrospect, I'm going to describe it as discomfort, not pain. The medical guys really have a lid on this. It was no more than a little bit of discomfort over the first couple of days. From then, everything has just been absolutely a walk in the park. Now into day 4 of my physiotherapy, getting strength back into the muscles that I've been asleep for the last, God knows, since my hips started giving me trouble. Really feeling a difference now. What can I say after a week? If you are looking at getting your hip replaced, put the work in advance. The benefit I seem to be getting now from the work I did over the last 4 months is I can't even describe it. Most of the physiotherapy here is actually strength and condition for the rest of your body, not just the operative leg. And I'm finding the work that I did over the last 4 months is just money in the bank. It makes everything else much easier. Thoughts now moving into next week. I just can't wait to move on from here. Everything has just been so easy so far. Building up my strength. I'm looking forward to seeing my family again now in a week or 10 days. Everyone's happy, everything's working.
Just going for my morning walk. It's about 8 a.m. and this is the coldest day by far. It's 27 degrees, but at least it's very dry, so no risk of falling or anything like that. Everything seems to be going well so far. I think I'm about 12 days after surgery.
One of the things that really surprised me was how uncomfortable it was to sit for any period of time after my total hip replacement. And I'm not just talking about the first week, but for several months thereafter. And it was also more comfortable for me to sit on a cushion, sort of raised up a little bit. I think that put my hip at a better angle because I have pretty long legs. So anyhow, I had all these visions that during my recovery, I'd be getting together with people to play cards, and I bought a big Lego set. I thought we'd have people over and we'd have little sessions of building this big Lego set. But as it turned out, it was super uncomfortable. So whenever I would have to sit, I would have to get up frequently and just move around the room. Oh, and I didn't use that cushion just like to sit at the dining room table. I used it everywhere. I took it with me to friends' houses. I used it in the car. I took it with me to church. Just about anywhere, including on a flight to visit my parents. Just having my hip at a better angle made it considerably more comfortable. So anyhow, you might want to pick something like that up just so you have the option.
Now that I'm on the nice paved flat greenway, I don't mind walking while I record. The entrance that I was on before is gravel and downhill and uneven, so I didn't want to risk walking without my walking sticks, right? I've been able to ditch the crutches, but I still keep these for when I'm going downhill or over uneven terrain, just as a precaution, because the worst possible thing you could do right now is fall and damage your hip in the surgery. So I feel like I am walking pretty evenly. I'm trying not to limp or favor one leg over the other. And people have actually stopped me on my walks and commented that I seem to be walking pretty evenly, even though they don't know necessarily what I've been through. They just see me walking with a crutch or a stick or something. So I feel pretty good about that. I think it's important because you don't want to reinforce bad behaviors and get your muscles out of kilter. You want to get them back into kilter and supporting your body in the correct way. So I did have an over-friendly dog lunge at me just now. And I guess that's one thing that gives me a little bit of pause about ditching the crutches in favor of walking sticks or nothing at all. I feel like when I'm out in public, they may not know that I'm only 3 weeks out of surgery. And so they might do something that puts me in jeopardy or causes me to fall. So maybe I will keep the crutches with me more often when I'm out in public. So just so people can see that they need to be cautious around me. Had my first post-operative appointment this morning, 2 weeks and 2 days after surgery, and I just got back from my first walk without a crutch. Instead, I used these walking sticks just in case. They're a lot more comfortable to use than the crutch is. So I'm just so happy to be rid of the crutches finally.
At my 2.5 week post-op checkup, the first one I had after my surgery, I was very anxious to get back to certain types of exercise so that I wouldn't lose all of the fitness that I worked so hard to maintain pre-op. And so I had a serious discussion with my surgeon about this, and we discussed what sorts of exercises and activities were acceptable at different stages of my recovery and which ones were not. As a result, I put together several videos, which you can find on my original channel. But I'm also going to work on combining those into a single fitness video, which I'll put on the new channel, Pete's Hip Vlog. So check out one of those if you're interested in this topic.
The month of February were still early days for me. Those were my post-op weeks 2 through 5. So things were still pretty uncomfortable, and I was very early in recovery. We had another wedding to attend early in the month, and that was pretty tough. I wouldn't have missed it for the life of me, but I was really only able to stay for the ceremony and a quick dinner and then headed right home. Recovery at this stage is mostly about walking, and not walking super long distances either. You just want to make sure that you're improving a little bit day over day. You might have noticed that up till now I haven't really mentioned physical therapy, and that's because when it comes to total hip replacement, surgeons are split about 50-50, where some say they do recommend physical therapy, and others, like my surgeon, do not recommend any formal physical therapy after total hip replacement. I've done a lot of research on this, I've polled people on the support groups, and as best I can tell, it's about 50-50. But of course, everybody has strong opinions one way or the other. So you and your surgeon will have to decide what's best in your particular circumstance. As for me, I was happy not to have formal physical therapy. However, I had worked so hard to maintain my physical fitness that I really wanted to start doing some additional exercises after surgery. So in my 2.5 week post-op visit with my doctor, I asked what sorts of things I could do. And so I started easing back into an exercise routine.
I'm about 4 weeks post-op from total hip replacement, and I'm just trying to get in an early morning walk because the rain is coming today and most of the day I think is going to be rainy. So this is one of my favorite parts of the trail, and I'm walking unassisted. I should do about 2.5 miles on this walk. I've been averaging about 5 miles a day for the last few days. Another milestone today, I was able to put on my wedding ring. That's something I haven't been able to do for several months because when I take those NSAIDs, the anti-inflammatory drugs,
they cause me to swell up. I gain about 5 pounds of water weight and my finger gets really tight. And so I felt it was safer to just keep that wedding ring off for a couple months before surgery as well as after surgery. But now that I'm off all the meds, my finger swelling has gone down and I was able to get my ring on easily this morning. So, whew.
How and when can I drive my little sports car? You might say, Pete, I don't have a little sports car. This doesn't apply to me. Well, really, it does. It applies to anything and to anyone who's had hip replacement because the process and the approach that I take to this is the same one that you should employ when you're trying to resume any sport or activity. So please watch and see how I approach it and try to do the same for whatever it is that you're trying to resume. And if you need additional tips and information, I do have this video specifically about resuming sports and activities that you love. And there's a helpful guide that accompanies it that'll go over a whole bunch of different sports and activities and how I would approach those.
So when did I start driving again? Well, my surgeon said as soon as I was off the narcotics, I'd be able to drive, but I wasn't sure I'd be safe driving. So about 2 weeks after my surgery, my wife and I took her minivan to an empty parking lot so I could try driving. And I was able to, but because my hip replacement was my right side, and that's the side I use for operating a gas pedal and a brake, I didn't really feel safe doing it. My leg was super weak, especially the muscles for like lifting it up and moving it, and you wouldn't want to have to like jam down on the brake super hard. Granted, 98% of the time I would be fine driving around, but if there was an emergency or I had to react quickly, that could be a problem. So I opted not to drive until about 4 weeks. And the other big challenge I faced was I owned this teeny tiny sports car, and I wanted to figure out when I'd be able to get into that. Even on a normal day, it can be challenging to get in and out of that car. So what I did is I set myself a tentative goal of 4 weeks post-op for getting back into my little sports car. And I started practicing about 10 days prior to that, just the motions, right? Could I get into position to enter and exit the car? Could I then move my leg into position? Could I then duck under and tuck myself into the car, et cetera, et cetera. So as with everything with this recovery, I approached it with baby steps and very, very cautiously because it was not worth it to me to mess up my new hip. Okay, so I'm 4 weeks post-op today, and I'm going to see if I can get into my Alfa Romeo 4C. This is a very small car, and even when I'm fully healthy, it's kind of challenging to get in and out. So only 4 weeks after total hip replacement, I'm not sure how easy or difficult this is going to be, but I'm going to give it a try. I'm not just jumping into this. I've been easing into this process over a period of about 10 days, trying incremental moves, baby steps if you will, to try and get my body used to the motions that are necessary and the muscles activated that are going to be necessary to get in and out of this car and then ultimately to drive it. So to give you an idea, when I first started about 10 days ago, trying to work my way up to this, I would just stand here with the door open and I would see how high I could lift my leg, because lifting my leg after that surgery is one of the things that's been very difficult, and it's taken time to regain that strength and range of motion, and it still is extremely weak. So first I just started lifting it like this, and I would do that a couple times a day, and then the next day I might try and see if I had a little bit more range of motion and strength, and I would try to lift it up a little higher. And then another day or two later, then maybe I was able to actually get it in and raise it over the threshold. So I was able to do that, and then I would try and do that a couple times, maybe 3 or 5 times, just to get used to the motion. And after I did this, I could tell that I felt aches and pains that I'd not felt before. So I knew that I was moving my hip joint into new areas of motion. I was extending my range of motion, and I wanted to be cautious not to overdo it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I've been easing into this process. After I was able to lift my leg over the threshold several times, then the next step was to see how it would be to ease myself down onto the sill. And I didn't want to rest my body entirely on the sill initially because I wasn't sure what kind of pressure that was going to be putting on my hip joint, but I eventually worked my way into that, right? So I'd get like this, I'd grab the steering wheel and the seat, and I'd kind of go like this, like I would normally to get into the car, just to see if I could get down into this position and back up again, right? And then get back out. And so I did that for a day or two. It's a little bit tiring just even showing you this.
I think this is a great reminder that your body is still doing a lot of healing, and it's very easy to fatigue for up to 9 to 12 months. Now, obviously, it's going to be more so at the beginning of your recovery than at the end, but I'm 4 weeks into my recovery here. And if you were to look at me externally, I mean, you could hardly tell that I've had total hip replacement. But the damage inside is, it's severe, it's traumatic, and it's going to take a long time to heal. And your body continues to work at that. So I've heard from lots of people, for example, about going back to work and things like that. And they're surprised, that just working for a few hours, they're completely exhausted. So please, take things easy and expect that you might get exhausted more easily than you normally would doing just everyday activities.
And then the next step was to actually slide in. So I tried this motion a few times where I would get in and just rest on the sill, just like this, right? And then I would tuck under, and then trying to put as little weight on my new hip as possible, I would kind of scoot in. And so here I am 4 weeks after total hip replacement in my Alfa Romeo 4C. Haha. And my wife was the last one to drive this car, so that actually made it harder to get in. I should have remembered that. She's now driven it 2 or 3 times. And she had never driven it before. She doesn't really understand sports cars. She drives a minivan, loves her minivan. So it was just kind of nice for me to have her finally try it and be able to like it. She wasn't impressed, but at least now we know she can drive it, and it's not a huge obstacle if we need to trade vehicles one day. So how was your first drive?
I do not understand why anybody would want to drive. It's terrible.
So anyhow, now I'm inside the car, and the very first time I got in here a few days ago, I had a momentary sense of panic because I realized nobody else was home, and I was not sure I was going to be able to get out. So I sat here and kind of gathered my thoughts and gathered up my courage and then tried to get myself out, and luckily I was able to. But that was a little bit of a surprise for me. Okay, so now I'm going to try and get out, and I have done this a couple times, but just to show slowly. So again, I kind of brace myself. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on my operative leg. So I kind of brace myself with my hands, put my non-operative leg out like I always do, and then I kind of try and scooch over onto the sill again, not putting any pressure on my operative leg, as little as possible. So I'm now pushing up with my non-operative leg. So there you go. I'm actually able to get in and out of the car successfully, and the next step will be taking it for a joyride, see if I can actually drive this thing. Let's start her up. Sounds nice. I'm going to get out one more time just to double check the camera's recording. Back again. Well, that was fun. Nice to get out and stretch my legs, so to speak. Now I get to see how my hip and everything else feels after having gone on that little joyride.
Today is my 7-week post-op anniversary for my total hip replacement, and I'm going for my second trail walk today. Up until now, I've been walking exclusively on paved sidewalks and greenways and things like that. But I had my 6-week post-op visit last week, and the doctor said that I could start walking off trail just to take it easy. And as I said, this is my second off trail walk. So the first one, after that, I definitely felt sore and new muscles engaging. I did 1.5 miles that time. So I'm going to try and do 2 miles today, and hopefully everything will continue to feel fine, and I'll keep going from there.
As much as I wasn't able to do a lot of sitting during my recovery, I was able to do a lot of walking. And walking was good for me, within limits. And it also felt pretty comfortable. So it was something that I could do. And I used it as an opportunity to reconnect with some old friends, right? Normally, life is so busy, you're involved in the things that you love. I play a lot of volleyball, but there are other people in my life that I maybe don't get to spend as much time with. And since I was doing so much walking, I would reach out to folks that I hadn't talked to in a little while and said, hey, would you like to go for a walk with me at the Museum of Art Gardens? Or would you like to go for a hike with me at Umstead or something like that? So it was a great opportunity to reconnect with some old friends.
I'm hiking 4 miles on the Mountains to Sea Trail today, here near Falls Lake in Raleigh, North Carolina. Yesterday I also hiked 4 miles in Umstead Park in Raleigh, so feeling okay. I had a little bit of discomfort after yesterday's hike, but I think it's just, muscles getting used that haven't been used in a while and things like that. So feeling pretty good. Thought I'd do another 4 miles today because tomorrow's going to rain. Being that March was the second month after my total hip replacement, it was much the same as February, with a lot of walking, a lot of easing back into exercises to build up my physical fitness, and a few milestones. For example, I took my first walk on a trail, and I took my first walk on a sand volleyball court. I just went there to see what it would be like because I hadn't been on an unstable surface like sand with my new hip yet. Mike learned a few new poses, and we had a rare sighting of 2 Oscar Mayer Wienermobiles. Honestly, I was surprised by how much of my time it took just to perform the rehabs, to go for the walks, to do the exercise, and to work on regaining my physical fitness. I can understand why some people find it so difficult to do all the things necessary for successful hip recovery.
During this time, we also had to meet with our tax preparer, and we brought checks in order to pay our taxes. I'm not sure what was more painful, paying the taxes or going through total hip replacement. But we did get to celebrate, and we went out for dinner at a restaurant called, coincidentally, Death and Taxes.
So today I'm about 13 weeks post-op, and I'll be flying for the first time, going to visit my parents in Chicago. So about 1.5 hours on the plane, and then a couple hours drive to get to their place. So right now I'm just going on a little bit of a morning walk to loosen up my legs. Otherwise, I'm not doing anything strenuous today because all the sitting in the plane and all the driving is going to be strenuous enough. Post-op weeks 11 through 14 happened during the month of April, and I continued to work on my fitness, increasing my workouts, and of course, documenting those in a video. As mentioned previously, I'm not going to repeat stuff that I've already documented in other videos, so I'll just include a quick reference here in case you want to watch one of those other videos to get all the details. It can be really tricky to figure out what a particular injury is and if it's related to your total hip replacement or not. And just in the normal course of leading an active life, I often experience aches and pains, muscle knots, muscle strains, minor tears, etc. But during this period, I was getting fit again and increasing my activity significantly. You can see here with these ab workouts that I actually almost doubled the number of ab workouts from one month to the next. And even though that was a much lower level of activity than pre-op, it was still a significant increase. So while I was doing abdominal floor work, I started to experience some pain in my lower left back. Now my hip surgery was on my right side, so I didn't immediately think that it was caused by the hip or related to the hip, but I of course realized it could be somehow related to shifts in my body as I correct for compensations from before surgery.
but I assumed it was just a normal muscle pull or strain or something like that, and I treated it like a soft tissue injury. Two important milestones in the month of April. One was my first flight. I took a trip to visit my parents in Northwest Indiana, and so that all went very smoothly. Again, because people are always curious about flying after total hip replacement, I created a video to help them understand what to expect. And I had my first volleyball warm-up game. I had some friends who were playing and convinced them to allow me to come and play one game with them before they started their normal rotation.
Today I'm about 17 weeks post-op, and I just got back from a 7-mile hike with a friend. We went to Umstead Park and did the Company Mill Trail plus a little bit. So that's a little bit more than what I was hiking before my hip surgery. So I really feel like I'm back about to normal. I'm not fully healed, obviously, at 4 months, but because I still feel some aches and some pains, and my muscles are still getting stronger. But I can do all the hiking that I used to do and feel pretty good about it.
With newborn babies, you measure their age first in days, then weeks, then months, then years. And it's kind of similar with a new hip. So at this point, I think it's safe to switch from measuring time in weeks to months. At 4 months post-op, I had several significant milestones achieved this month. Most important to me was that I was able to get back to playing 2-hour volleyball events. Before surgery, I was playing 2 or 3 times per week, and each event was about 2 hours or 2.5 hours. So this was a huge milestone for me. And as you can imagine, I didn't just jump into it. I eased back into it slowly. And first I was playing for like a half hour or an hour, and I made sure I had 5 players at these events so that if anything felt wonky with my hip, I could just bow out and not ruin the event for the other players. And eventually I was able to get back to playing my regular 2-hour events. So that was awesome. This video presents a common sense approach to resuming any sport or activity. Of course, I use my favorite sport, beach volleyball, as the example, but really it can be applied to just about any sport or activity. Most hippies are trying to figure out when they can resume a favorite sport or activity about this time frame, so check it out. The other big milestone was that I attended 2 racing events. You might not think that has much to do with total hip replacement, but actually it does, because when you're driving a car this aggressively, your hips are actually a primary means of communication. They give you a lot of feedback, and there are a lot of G-forces that you're experiencing going around corners very quickly. So while this video might look fairly sedate, if you're actually in the cockpit, you would know that we're driving very fast, very aggressively, and at the limits of mechanical grip for these vehicles, as well as the limits of our own driving skills. So it was a lot of fun, and other than a little bit of soreness, my hips fared well. By 5 months post-op, I was walking more than I'd ever walked before, so I started to explore new sections of our greenway system. Check this out.
Okay, I don't know what we have going on right here. This appears to be vastly over-engineered. This is definitely the most complicated section of a greenway I have ever seen. I am honestly not sure what to make of it. So let's see what happens here. This is just crazy towns, this section of greenway. I just can't believe they built this thing, and I can only imagine how many millions of taxpayer dollars this cost. This is the spot where I banged my head in frustration after seeing all the wasted taxpayer dollars on this section of our greenway system.
Even though I was walking more than ever before, I was still struggling to lose the weight I'd gained after surgery, about 10 pounds. I finally got rid of it with the help of 2 accountability partners on Facebook. Here you can see I'm on this teeny tiny scale that I took with me to the beach.
In my case, I made a conscious effort to eat well during my recovery because you do need fuel for the healing process. So don't starve yourself during your recovery. You will have reduced activity, and so it's likely that you're going to gain some weight. You may also gain weight just from swelling, from water retention. In my case, I usually gain about 5 pounds when I'm taking NSAIDs. So accept that you may gain a little bit of weight temporarily, but don't starve yourself. Don't deprive yourself of important things like protein that are going to help you in the healing process. That said, I wanted to get back to my normal weight. I'd gained 10 or 12 pounds during my recovery. I found a couple accountability partners, and that was very helpful. But a year or so later, my mom still had gained quite a bit of weight, not just from the hip surgery, but just old age, being sedentary, etc. And I had an opportunity to visit her, spend about 10 days with her, just the two of us. And so I did a little experiment. I wanted to see if the things that I do to stay fit and lose weight would work even if you were 80 years old, which is what my mom was at the time. And it was an amazing success. So the same things that I do will work for anyone at any age. The younger you are, the easier it will be. The older you are, it's going to be a little bit harder, a little bit slower, but it works no matter what. So I put together this video, and I hope you'll check it out if you're at all concerned about getting rid of some excess weight after you have properly healed from total hip replacement.
June was also the time for our annual beach trip, so there were lots of nice walks there. Although I admit I was not very comfortable walking on the sand at this stage of my recovery, so mostly I walked inland on the sidewalks. So there you have it, actual documentary proof that Pete can dance. I guess I should say I really can't dance, but I made a good effort and didn't embarrass myself too much at my daughter's wedding. So yes, that was the big news. July was my daughter's wedding. It was a wonderful, wonderful event, and I love to dance, but I got no rhythm. And I really, really wanted to dance at my daughter's wedding, so I actually practiced for several weeks in advance. I tried to find sort of a script dance like the Cupid Shuffle that I could do and follow along, and I tried to learn a couple basic dance moves. I even watched some videos trying to figure out how to pick out the beat in songs so that I could dance along. One of the things that really surprised me was how I could feel dance moves in my hip. I had been doing all kinds of exercise and hiking and volleyball and things like that, but when I would try some fairly basic dance moves, I could really feel it in my hip. So for all those people who dance and want to get back to dancing, I'd just say be cautious. Thankfully, your bodies are probably used to those motions. Mine is not. And so those things were just really, really challenging, I felt. It gave me a whole new appreciation for dance.
At 6 months post-op, many of us are feeling pretty good, and we're able to do a lot of the things that we were able to do in our earlier lives. And you may be wondering, when can I tackle a big adventure like hiking the Camino Santiago? So I'll address that now.
The other big thing in the month of July was just preparing for my hike of the Camino Santiago. That hike actually started the last week of July, but most of it occurred in August. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that in the August category. Before I get started with some tips today, I just wanted to say there is hope. So I am just past 6 months post-op, and today I am in Spain, and I completed day one, about an 11-mile hike of the Camino Santiago, specifically the Camino Inglés. And yes, I'm sore and I'm tired, but I don't think particularly because I had hip replacement. It's a long hike, and I carried a pretty heavy backpack. I'm guessing it probably had about 18 or 19 pounds in it, maybe even a little bit more. So anyhow, hang in there, work through, do your rehab, get fit again, and live your life. There is hope at the end of the tunnel, and hip replacement is not the end of the road. So good luck, everybody. Well, I'm still thrilled that I got to have this amazing experience, this whole 3-week trip, including the 6 days and 72 miles on the Camino Santiago. There are some things I would have done differently. With perfect 20/20 hindsight, I wish I'd heeded the warning of my surgeon. He said, "The key sign you're overdoing it is thigh pain." If you listen closely to my daily updates throughout this video, you'll hear some hints to that. In retrospect, I just wish that I'd recognized it for what it was at the time.
This trip is going to be almost 3 weeks long. About a week of that is the Camino Inglés. Before the hike, we're going to spend 4 or 5 days in northern Spain, in Galicia. At the end of the trip, after the hike, we're going to go to Portugal and just check it out. I've never been to Portugal before, so I'm looking forward to that. And then the icing on top of the cake here, I'm going to rent a Ferrari F8 for 2 days. And I'm really looking forward to that. Basically, I don't think I'm ever going to own a Ferrari. So this is my opportunity to drive it in some beautiful scenery and on some great roads, fun roads, I hope. Before I embark on an 18-day trip to Spain and Portugal that includes a 6-day hike on the Camino Santiago, I wanted to take stock of where I am physically
In terms of the hike itself, I have been doing some prep hikes. I did a 4-mile and then a 6-mile trail hike on Saturday. That was yesterday. And I have to say I feel pretty good. Other than that, I always have some things going on because I lead a very active lifestyle. So for example, going into this trip, I have a problem with my left shoulder. I think I overextended it or landed on it or both when I was playing volleyball this past week. I have a problem in my lower left back. And that's actually been with me for over 2 months now. I don't know what actually caused it. And then my right ankle, I sprained a little bit maybe about 3 weeks ago. It's not a severe sprain. I've been able to continue doing everything that I do, but it's been a little bit uncomfortable and sore. So I've been icing that. I've been occasionally wearing braces. So those are the things that are going on with me now as I go into this trip. And we'll see how kind it all is to me and how I fare. So wish me luck.
We made it to Bilbao in Spain, and everything went pretty smoothly. I think we traveled for almost 24 hours and had some chaos at the beginning, but everything worked out, got here as planned. And someone asked how it was going to be on the long plane flight across the Atlantic, and it was fine. Actually, I had a little bit of pain in my hip joint, but not very much at all. And I didn't even have to get up all that often to stretch. I only did it a couple times, so that was fine. And on that last flight, which was only an hour domestic flight, my friend Fernando lost his volleyball. They somehow deemed that as too dangerous, and they confiscated his volleyball. So my walking sticks made it, but not his volleyball. Anyhow, go figure. Okay, your intrepid traveler is ready to start on the Camino Santiago today. I am in A Coruña, where we spent the night, and we have to travel now. It's a busy morning. We have to go return the car, fill it with fuel, buy a bus ticket to go to Ferrol, and then do the first day of our hike. So it's pretty early, about 8 a.m., and I hope everything goes smoothly. It was drizzling this morning, but it seems to have stopped now. I've got my pack ready to go. I fell in the shower this morning, which makes me feel really old. Luckily, it was from a seated position, not from standing. But, knock on wood, everything feels okay. So wish me luck on my first day of journey.
Our very first stop on the Camino Santiago was this little church, and there was a wedding going on, and a little old lady came running out to us shouting, "Peregrino, peregrino," and we thought we were going to be in trouble and she was going to try and chase us away because of the wedding, but we then learned that peregrino means pilgrim, and she was coming to help stamp our pilgrim passports.
Oh yeah, hola Fernando. How's it going so far?
Oh, exhausted.
Yes, same here.
But a good one.
So do your impression of the little lady at the church yesterday.
Oh, peregrinos, peregrinos.
That's right. Sweet lady. Okay, well, we're about halfway through day 2 of our Camino Inglés trek. We'll see how the rest goes. Okay, it's the end of day 2 on the Camino Inglés, and I wanted to give you a bit of an update. I did 7 hours of hiking today, 16 or 17 miles, and I am bone tired, but the hip is doing great. I am sore and achy and everything, but I have to say, as far as I can tell, none of it is specific to my hip. The bottoms of my feet are tender just from all the walking. I'm very curious to see how it will be tomorrow after such a long hike today. We've got another 14-mile hike tomorrow to our next stop. Hi, just a couple more notes about our day 2 hike on the Camino Inglés. I did take a couple migraine relief tablets during the course of the day just to sort of head off any potential inflammation or anything. Again, not really thinking it was anything to do with my hip, but I just don't want to take any chances, and I figured that was a moderate precaution and just allowed me to hike more enjoyably. Also, the food here has just been fabulous. It's the end of day 3, and not coincidentally, I'm on my 3rd beer. So hopefully this is all coherent. Anyhow, we did 14 miles today, and all went well up until about the last mile and a half. And I find it interesting when I'm doing sort of extreme stuff like all the hiking from this trip to see what gives out first. And today it seemed to be some fine muscles in my left shin, which is my non-operative side, so again, nothing to do with my hip replacement. But the last mile and a half, those were really like tender, inflamed. It hurt to walk
And anyhow, I'm resting them now and hope that they'll feel better tomorrow. I'm a little bit worried. So I'm going to take some anti-inflammatories and just rest the rest of the day, even though it's only about 5 o'clock. We got here about 4 o'clock. Okay, we're on day 4 of the Camino Santiago. And this has been kind of typical for us on our journey so far. As we get closer to Santiago de Compostela, it will get very, very crowded as all the different Camino paths converge for the big pilgrimage destination. Yesterday was day 4, and my shin felt fine all day long. It was a fairly short hike. We did 8 or 9 miles, and that was fine. We got to our destination around noon, which was super early, so we kind of tried to heal from the previous couple days of very long hikes, and because we knew today was going to be a very long hike, 15 miles again. So when I was getting ready for bed, I did feel a twinge in my hip, my operative hip. And I don't think it's anything concerning because it wasn't like outright serious pain. It was definitely a twinge of pain, some minor discomfort. Unfortunately, then I took some of my remaining oxycodone. I had like little half tablets, and I think the result is that sometimes wires me, and I wasn't able to get a good night's sleep. So I'm feeling kind of tired today, and we've got a rough, long hike today. But anyhow, that was day 4. It was worked out pretty well. The weather on yesterday's hike, day 4, was very pleasant. It was overcast most of the morning and not very hot. It got up in the upper 70s. Today it's rainy and cooler, so it's supposed to be just like 71 or 72 degrees. So I'm actually wearing my long-sleeved wool base layer. That should help keep me warm even if I get wet. And I've got a rain poncho that I'll probably be wearing over top of this if it's raining or misting. We're hoping by the afternoon it clears, so hopefully it's only the first few hours of our hike that are going to be uncomfortable. But again, hopefully we have good luck. So far this hike has been fabulous. We've had really good luck with weather and everything. Side note, there are a lot of people named Maria in Spain. Fernando and I joked about it a little bit, but I think the math goes like this. You are having a child, a female child, and your name is not Maria, then my daughter will be named Maria. And if you are named Maria, then I guess you need to pick a different name. But the result has been that, yesterday our hostess was Maria. We stopped to get a coffee and some beverages. The barkeep was Maria. We're meeting a friend in a couple days. Her name is Maria. And there are just a lot of Marias around here. So anyhow, I think it's because it's, at its heart, traditionally a Catholic country. And, Santa Maria, the mother of Jesus. So it's kind of interesting. But I think like 70% of our hosts on the Airbnbs and things are named Maria, and the ones that are not named Maria are usually men. So just kind of a funny little factoid. Today's day 5, and it's our last big hike day. We've got about 15 miles to Sigüero. And if you look outside, it is not looking very promising. In fact, it's probably not possible to see it on the video, but it's raining pretty steadily right now. It's been alternating between steady rain and just mist. And it's supposed to keep doing this until probably noon or so. So we're not quite sure what we're going to do. Our plan was to start a little bit later than usual, around 9 a.m., wear our rain gear, and just make the best of it. But, I don't really want to start out when it's already raining steadily. I'd rather wait for a pause, and we'll see how it goes. Again, part of the bad thing today is that it's this weather, and we have a 15-mile hike, which is at least probably 6 good hours of hiking with some breaks. So we can't wait too long to get started. I will update you at the end of the day, and hopefully things work out. Okay, we're getting started on day 5, 15 miles long hike. The sun was peeking out a second ago. We waited until 11 a.m. this morning because it's been raining all morning. So hopefully the rest of the day is beautiful. Okay.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Buen camino para nosotros.
Buen camino.
So I'm meditating on my Camino Santiago trip so far. This is our last day. Should be a relatively light day. We've got about 10 miles to get to Camino Santiago, and I'm kind of excited to see what it's like, where all the paths converge at the Santiago de Compostela, where they have the remains of St. James. So we'll see how it all goes, and I'll try to capture some of that footage. Yesterday was another long hike, and I can feel definitely like, after 5 consecutive days of hiking, everything is stiff. My muscles are very stiff and joints are a little bit sore. I felt my hip a little bit yesterday as well and was taking meds to try and, head off any potential inflammation or anything like that. It wasn't serious pain, but I think typically what happens is, after you've been hiking for most of a day, then a lot of the small muscles that are supporting your joints get exhausted. And so I think that's what was happening. Anyhow, so far so good, and hope that the rest of my Camino experience is just as good. So how did my hip fare on the Camino Santiago? I think pretty well. The first few days, I don't think I noticed any aches or pains relative to my hip specifically. The last 3 days, I will say that I did feel some discomfort. So for example, I remember a couple nights ago, I had trouble sleeping because I was feeling a twinge in sort of my hip joint, where it flexes at the pelvis. And it was enough discomfort that it kept me awake for a good part of the night. I did take some painkillers and things like that, but it was pretty uncomfortable. And then the last 2 days, it has been somewhat uncomfortable. Also, my thigh, my quad muscle, which still kind of feels funny after the surgery, was in some pain and discomfort. I'm not really limping. It isn't that bad, but there is some discomfort. Today starts phase 3 of our vacation. The first phase was northern Spain. Second phase, we did the Camino Santiago, specifically the Camino Inglés. And then the third phase, we're taking a bus later today to Portugal, to Porto. And we're going to spend a few days in Porto and then a few days in Lisbon. So that will culminate our almost 3-week vacation.
Now that this trip is behind me, and with perfect 2020 hindsight, we've all got that, don't we? What would I do differently? In terms of the gear that I packed, I wouldn't change anything. There were some things that I didn't use, but they were still good as precautions, and if the weather had turned out differently or some other factor had turned out differently, I might have needed those items. So I kind of thought through it, and everything I took with me, I'm glad I took with me. In terms of preparing for the trip, I think I could have done a better job. So if you recall, I basically did a 4-mile walk with my backpack fully loaded, and then I did a 6-mile trail hike with my backpack fully loaded. That's it. So if I were to do this again, I think I would probably try and hike 3 times during 1 week with my pack, maybe 4 miles, 5 miles. And then the next week I would probably hike 6, 7, 8 miles, 3 times that week. And I think at that point I would have better acclimated myself and prepared myself for the Camino Santiago. In terms of the walk itself, the Camino Inglés is the specific walk that we did, and that can be done in 5 to 8 days. We did it in 6 days, and in retrospect, and after having recovered now from that bone inflammation setback that I've mentioned, I would have tried to space it out even further. And more than that, there were some things I could have done differently. There were options to get porter services to take your backpacks from one stop to the next. I think I should have done that. It wasn't very expensive, sounded pretty convenient, and that would have saved me carrying 19 or 20 pounds on my back during all those hikes. So that would have just taken a lot of load off of my body and off of my hip. After walking the Camino Inglés, we still had another week in our vacation, and we did a lot during that week. We walked a lot, we played volleyball the day before we came back to the States, a lot of volleyball, more than I normally play. And I think that if I were doing this trip again, I would make sure to take more time to rest after the Camino Inglés, because that was pretty intense. And so I think a good 3 days of rest after that would have been really good for my body, and I think would have helped me prevent any setbacks. What about the Camino Inglés itself, or the Camino Santiago network? It was not exactly what I expected. I thought this was going to be a hike. It's really more of a walk, and of course it's known as a pilgrimage. So if you're looking for a hike, this is really not a hike. It's more of a walk. You're in not heavily populated, but you're definitely going through populated areas. You're often walking on back roads that are not full of traffic, but you're not far away from civilization. It's not like some of the other hikes I've done, which are more like adventure hikes, like the Milford Track in New Zealand, or the Inca Trail in Peru, or even the hike I did many years ago in Malaysia in the Taman Negara, their national forest. So I would say that the Camino Santiago and the Camino Inglés are very achievable goals. You really have a lot of support resources. I mean, honestly, if we didn't want to hike one day or if I felt bad about it, we could have gotten an Uber or a taxi and just taken ourselves to the next stop. It is that easy. So I really think that for anyone looking for an achievable goal, it's pretty awesome and I'd highly recommend it. Thanks for watching, and I'd like to wish you a buen camino. Adios.
"8 months post-op was a crucial time in my recovery. I suffered a major setback, which I'll discuss here shortly, and I rode a bicycle for the first time, which might surprise you. But when it comes to that, the integration of your implant into your femur takes fully 9 months. And until that time, an accident or a fall can have serious implications on your total hip replacement. So I waited until 8 months before I took my first bike ride outside. Now, biking in particular is a dangerous activity for a total hip replacement because you're going at high speed, you're at an elevated height, and there's some unpredictability. A dog could lunge at you, someone could come out of a corner. And it's also the definition of micromotion, right? So you're going over an uneven surface. You could be doing a lot of bumping and vibration, and micromotion can interfere with that osseointegration. So watch this video. It contains the best research that I've been able to find about the bone healing timeline and how micromotion can affect that.
I'm about 7 months post-op, and about a week ago, I went for a walk and had some serious pain in my quad, my thigh on the operative side. I don't know why, because I'd been doing great, hiking, playing volleyball, all kinds of good stuff. But I did something, evidently, and it feels like a pretty significant setback.
As it turns out, that was the understatement of the year, and this ended up being a serious setback. So watch this video to learn more about my bone inflammation setback, but more importantly, learn how to avoid it. Got thigh pain? It might be an indication of a serious problem with your implant. In this video, I talk about a setback that I suffered at 6 months post-op. One of the things Dr. K cautioned me about were activities that might damage that initial bone growth, and I found support for that in some of these studies. They talk about a fibrous encapsulation, and if you have too much micromotion of the prosthetic inside the bone, that will prevent proper bone integration, and instead this fibrous capsule forms around the implant, and that can ultimately lead to aseptic loosening and failure. The other big event in September was that my mom ended up getting total hip replacement, and this was kind of last minute, and I spent a lot of time traveling back and forth to help them while I was trying to recover from this setback.
This is Mike, as you know, my co-host in many of my hip vlogs. And today is my 8-month hip anniversary, so I thought it would be appropriate to have a hip vlog today. And I would just provide you with a few updates on my progress. So at 8 months, my implant should be pretty well integrated into my femur, the stem. That is really, I think, one of the longer parts of the healing process, although there's probably still the joint capsule and there's some tissue that is still healing deep inside my hip. A lot of people, I think, maybe underestimate the total amount of healing required to really get completely past this. It can be a year or more, depending upon your individual situation and your age and your health and your activity level and things like that. So at 8 months post-op, I'm able to do pretty much everything that I was before. I've had 3 total setbacks that I can think of, and I will document those in a separate video at some point. But I'm just past my most recent setback, which was due to bone inflammation. And when I saw the doctor, he said everything was good, but that what can often happen is if you have too much activity in a short period of time, the bottom of that stem is kind of pressing on the femur, on the inside of your femur, and that can cause the bone to become inflamed. And I actually felt that as sort of sharp shooting pains in my quad and my thigh, but I think I'm past that. I reduced my activity dramatically for about 5 weeks, and then over the last week, I have been slowly increasing my level of activity. I have been biking again, increasing my walking, not dramatically, but just slowly. I played volleyball twice this week, and when I played Thursday morning, it felt great. It was a very, very vigorous set of doubles. Actually, I won 50%. Afterwards, I felt really good, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was supposed to play volleyball a 3rd time this week. That would be the first time that I played 3 times in 1 week since my hip operation. But unfortunately, we've got a tropical storm or a hurricane nearby, and so today is rain, 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 and my volleyball plans got rained out. So that's unfortunate. But I thought I'd do instead an upper body workout, nothing too heavy, but just to continue improving my overall fitness and getting retoned because, after hip surgery, you're pretty inactive for a while. And it's amazing the older I get, how quickly your body deconditions. You lose muscle tone. And even like in this last setback, so for 5 weeks, I had dramatically reduced my activity level. And then over the last week, I did a couple abs workouts and a couple upper body workouts. And oh my gosh, I was so sore. It was amazing because in only 5 weeks, everything had atrophied that much. So I feel like I'm getting back to it. And I guess my tip there would be, always try to stay fit and active and do what you can and don't go dormant for too long because it makes it really hard to get back into it. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people suffer and why they stop exercising altogether and their health just generally starts to decline because it can be difficult and painful to stay on the course of regular fitness. And you just have to overcome those things. And I'm not talking about bad pain. I'm just talking about like muscular pain. Like my abs to the touch were sore and tender. There's nothing wrong with them. They just got overworked. And when I say overworked, I mean, it was not a workout that I hadn't done, a month previously. So they were just out of shape already after only 5 weeks of inactivity. In terms of other updates here on my 8-month anniversary, my mom just had hip replacement 2.5 weeks ago. And tomorrow I'm going out to Indianapolis to help her and my dad for a few days. They're staying with my sister right now. She just came home from a rehab facility on last Thursday, just after her 2-week mark. So her surgery was on a Wednesday. She came home 2 weeks and 1 day later from the rehab facility. She's still having some difficulty. I'll be very interested to see how she's doing in person when I go for this visit. Okay, so I've procrastinated getting started with my morning workout long enough. And I will bid you adieu and hope you all are doing great in your individual hip journeys.
9 months post-op was a huge milestone for me because my surgeon told me that at 9 months post-op, my bone would be fully integrated into the implant. Before that integration, he told me if I had an accident, like falling off my bike or something, that the implant was likely to break. But after that point, he said the implant is solid and like part of my body, so something else is more likely to break. I never take things on face value, so when my surgeon told me this and I was hearing in the forums that bones heal much faster than this, I looked into it further, and the research supports my surgeon's claims. So if you've been told that you're totally healed after a couple months from total hip replacement, you've been misinformed. This was super important to me, so I created this video to share the research that I dug up. 9 months after my total hip replacement, the majority of my healing is complete, and I can do pretty much anything that I want and get back to my normal life. As I sit here wearing this back brace at 12 months post-op, I'm reminded that total hip replacement is major surgery, and your body has undergone major trauma. So it can take 12 to 18 months to completely heal from this, even though on the outside you might look totally normal and be able to lead a totally normal life much sooner. The last couple weeks I had some pretty significant pain in my operative thigh, but I was pretty sure that I hadn't been overdoing it. After a deep tissue massage and rolling it on a foam roller for a couple days, it feels better, but it's a reminder that my body is still adjusting even 12 months after surgery. So would I do it again? Absolutely. This has given me my life back, and I hope it's given me another 10 or 20 years of an active lifestyle. Thankfully, the vast majority of total hip replacements turn out successfully and like mine, but not everyone has such a good experience. My mother had total hip replacement this year as well. She had her surgery in September and then unfortunately wound up with an infection, so she had to go back in for another surgery in October, 1 month later. Being 23 years older than I, her recovery has been a lot more difficult. But if you think about the pain she was in before surgery, I still think it was worth it for her, and the infection was just unlucky. The last 3 months of my first year after total hip replacement were busy and back to life as usual. We did a lot of things. Our persimmon tree had a bumper crop, so I spent some time developing jams and cobblers and all kinds of persimmon desserts. I got this cool license plate for my son's car. One of my sons and I spent a week at our beach house building out a bunk room that can now sleep 8, and we discovered an authentic Chinese restaurant which we absolutely love. This dish is called fish like squirrel tail. And I had to laugh when I saw it because I was like, so there's a dish that requires squirrel tail, which you can't acquire here in Raleigh, so you substitute in fish? But actually, what it is they slice the fish and cook it in such a way that it twists into this sort of spiral shape, and it's absolutely delicious. So I'd highly recommend fish like squirrel tail. If you've made it this far and you're not a subscriber to my channel, please take a minute to subscribe and set notifications on so that you'll be informed the next time I put out new content. And look for my hip support group on Facebook. Thanks for watching, and I wish you the best in your hip journey. I've learned a lot over the last year, so I can reflect back and comment with the benefit of hindsight.
I'll answer all the questions that I mentioned at the beginning of the video near the end of the video when I provide my 3-year update. But here at the 1-year mark, really the answers would be the same. So, 1 year post-op, I was feeling pretty good. I was doing everything that I used to do, and I really wasn't feeling any discomfort in my hip. It wasn't limiting me in any way, and life was back to normal. So life was good. So anyhow, that's just a brief update at 1 year post-op. The updates at 2 years and 3 years are pretty similar. I really don't think about my hip all that often, but as I said, I'll answer all those questions near the end during the 3-year update. I also wanted to mention that one of the reasons we often get total hip replacement is so that we can continue doing the things we love with the people we love. Well, I recently had an opportunity to go back down and hike a different trail, the Lares Trek, again to Machu Picchu in Peru. And this was with my eldest son. It was his college graduation trip, and we had a great time. And my hip at 2.5 years post-op performed admirably. Everything went well. So if you're interested in hiking and want to hear more about that experience, then please check out this video. As I promised earlier in the video, now I'm going to unpack my current pain and kind of explain what I'm going through there. And, I've mentioned that you often try different things to resolve pain. And sometimes you go for things that are a little bit maybe less traditional. So I just wanted to offer that up as well. You'll have to guess what's in that. So when I experienced this debilitating pain a couple days ago, I went through the process of trying to identify the pain and figure out what happened. And it's taken me a while, but I think I figured out what happened. It's the same pain. I have degenerative disc disease, which is something that happens to many of us with old age. Basically, the vertebrae have gotten compressed and there's some arthritis down there. It's compressing nerves and causing pain in different parts of the body. Well, my pain is in my lower back on the side opposite where I had my hip replacement. And Sunday, I got up and went outside at 6:30 a.m. to try and get in some weeding. So I was using the pump sprayer and bending over a lot, pumping it and spraying weeds. And then at 7 a.m., we went to volleyball, my two boys and I. We start at 7:30 a.m. so that we can get it squeezed in before church. And it was in that first game of volleyball that I really started feeling the pain, and it's a lot more pain than I've had in a long time. The other thing that I think contributed was that I forgot to take some pain reliever before volleyball. What I've been doing the last few months is taking something before volleyball called migraine relief. Okay, well, it's time for my 3-year post-op update. And again, this is literally today, my 3-year anniversary of my hip surgery. And as I mentioned in the 1-year update, I really don't think about my hip too much. In fact, the only reason I think about my hip on a regular basis is because helping folks like you is such a big part of my life, literally a daily part of my life. So other than that, it really doesn't bother me. I don't feel any pain. I'm not limited in any way. Granted, I don't go running anymore. But as I've mentioned in other videos, running was something I did for fitness. It was never something that I enjoyed. And so that was the one thing my surgeon said I probably should give up, and I was okay with that. Now, that said, at 3 years post-op, I don't think there's any reason I can't. My hip is totally healed. All that internal healing is complete. The hip capsule should have completely healed. So in theory, I should be able to do anything I want to do, including running. But, I don't know. I may at some point go for a short run, but I'm not going to rush into it or make it a big part of my life. I have plenty of other things that I enjoy. And I do have other aches and pains and things like the disc degenerative disease, which limit my ability to engage in physical activities. So, why run when that's not one of my favorite things? I'm going to spend my time doing the things that I love and also maintaining my fitness and mobility and things like that. So, now on to the questions. I did answer some of those questions throughout the video when it was relevant to a particular part of the timeline, but I want to go over the rest of those questions now, and I'm going to refer to my notes just so I don't miss anything. Okay, so when did I get back on a bike? I mentioned that earlier. That was at 8 months post-op. If you're interested in more about that question, go back to that section. What is the number one best PT exercise during recovery? The number one best exercise is walking, and even then, not to excess. The unique thing about total hip replacement is that you don't really need any formal PT unless you have some sort of compensations or other things going on. If it's just normal recovery from hip replacement, then walking is all you need. And even then, not to excess, because if you do it to excess, you can cause problems. So, that's it. Okay, now I have some questions from hippies. Now that it's been a while since your surgery, can you please talk a bit about how well you've recovered? Is your hip pain completely gone? Yes. How long did you still have groin pain after total hip replacement? So that's a good question. One of my primary symptoms pre-op was groin pain, and that was caused by an inflamed femoral nerve, sending referred pain down to that area of my body. And I was able to control it pretty well using some pain meds, but also prescription NSAID, meloxicam, pre-op. Now, of course, you have to discontinue all that stuff before surgery. And after surgery, I noticed that I still had some groin pain. So I asked my surgeon what I should do about it. And he said, well, go ahead and resume that meloxicam for as long as needed. Those were his exact words. It turns out after about 2 weeks, that groin pain went away and it's never come back. So if you're experiencing groin pain after surgery, you might want to give that a try. I'm not specifically recommending meloxicam, but just talk to your surgeon, get an NSAID, and see if that helps knock out that nerve inflammation, if that's the source of your groin pain, permanently. Are there still movements that are difficult? No. In fact, it's kind of funny. I'm not a very flexible person, and I don't typically sit like cross-legged. Like, I'm always amazed when you see people who are like sitting cross-legged or stuff on chairs, and I never really did that. Now, post-op, oddly enough, I find myself sitting cross-legged on the couch fairly often. It just feels comfortable now. I don't know why. I mean, I don't do it all the time, but especially if I'm eating something and I have a tray of food, I'll sit cross-legged and it feels fine to me now. So no, I'm not limited in any movements, and maybe I even have a little bit of increased movement in that respect. Is your walking stride normal? Yes. And I wanted to emphasize something I mentioned earlier in the video. When you're recovering, really concentrate on not limping. Concentrate on walking with a proper gait, because muscle memory is in play there. And however you train yourself is what your muscles will remember. So I made a very conscious effort to do that, and I would recommend that you do the same. What about leg length discrepancy? Was that or is that an issue? This is a good question because a lot of people are concerned about this. And quite frankly, there are a lot of leg length discrepancies that occur as a result of total hip replacement. It's a complicated subject. Now, in my case, it's kind of funny because I had a leg length discrepancy for about 20 or 25 years pre-op. And after the surgery, no more leg length discrepancy. So in my case, it actually got better. I do understand, and my surgeon actually warned me that there could be a discrepancy for up to a year just because of swelling from the surgery. When you're talking about leg length discrepancy, it's not like your leg is a stick, right? You've got several joints, you've got cartilage in between, you've got it connected to your pelvis can tilt different ways. So a lot of times a leg length discrepancy may not be a discrepancy in the length of a bone. It may be a tilt of your pelvis, or it could be so many different things. So it's a really tricky thing to measure, and it can be a really tricky thing to, achieve perfection with. Now, I try to think about the human body, and I think we all think of it as being symmetrical, but it's not. Okay. If you have a leg length discrepancy, in fact, I looked up the statistics, and a significant percentage of people have leg length discrepancies. In fact, it's rare that your legs would be exactly the same length. Now, most of those discrepancies are very, very small and minor, but when they get a little bit larger, it can cause problems. So, as I said, I had a leg length discrepancy pre op. I wore a lift in one of my shoes for 20 or 25 years, and now I don't. So, in my case, it's rectified itself. In your case, I would advocate patience. Let your body heal, let the inflammation die down, let your pelvis tilt back, and talk to your surgeon because, if it's a significant discrepancy, and there's a reason for it, like maybe your implant is the wrong length or something like that, then you might need to have a revision. Hopefully not, or you might be able to accommodate by using a lift in one of your shoes or something like I did for 20 or 25 years. Are you limited in any of your preferred physical activities? And are there any movements you can't perform, like running? So, as I've mentioned before, no, I can do everything that I want. I don't run, but it's by choice. I think you technically could run if you wish to. Do I have any regrets? Are there any constant reminders that I've had hip replacement surgery? No, no regrets. I would do it again. My outcome has been fabulous. When I think back to how much pain I was in and how much of a struggle it was to maintain fitness and weight and do the things that I loved, I'm absolutely thrilled that I've done it, and I hope that I'll have 20 or 30 years of good active life from my implant. And as I've mentioned, no, I don't have any constant reminders that I had total hip replacement surgery. Now, I understand some people do. There are folks that will get nerve damage, they will have pain afterwards, but the vast majority of outcomes are very, very positive. So just bear that in mind. But again, there are no guarantees. Now, this next one is an interesting question. Are there other chronic conditions that seem to have made themselves known now that the hip has been resolved, like back pain, etc.? It's interesting. There's this old joke. It's like, "Oh, doctor, my neck hurts," and then the doctor hits your foot with a hammer. And it's like, "Oh, now all of a sudden you don't think about your neck pain anymore, do you?" Well, the body actually kind of works that way. So it can only process a certain amount of pain, and then it shuts off any other pain. So it's very possible that after you've solved your hip pain, that you start to notice other pains. And you might wonder, it's like, oh my, is this related to my hip replacement? Well, it might be, or it might not be. So in my case, when I was recovering, I started to experience some pain in my lower back, but on the side opposite from my hip replacement. So I didn't immediately think that it was related. Now, I have done some research, and there are cases where it can be related, but I'm pretty sure that that's not the case for me because now I've seen many doctors about it, had MRIs and x rays, and it's pretty clear that I have what's known as disc degenerative disease, which is something that many of us will suffer with in old age. Not all of us have pain from it, but I'm one of the unfortunate ones that has had pain now for almost 3 years. And it's pretty constant. It's pretty annoying. I've had a couple treatments that have helped, but right now nothing is helping. So, as I said, I started to notice that pain about 3 months into my recovery. Now, whether or not I actually had the problem prior to that, I mean, I'm sure I did. This stuff doesn't develop overnight. But it's possible that because I was having so much pain in my groin and knee and stuff from my bad hip, that I already had some pain from the disc degenerative disease, but it just didn't register. It gets kind of muddled with the other overriding pain. So I'd say it's pretty typical that you could notice some new pains when your hip pain is gone. And it can be very tricky to figure out what is related to the hip and what's not. And diagnosis, I find, as I get older, gets harder and harder. What things do you wish you had done before surgery? For this, I will refer you to this video where I specifically address that question with lots of great tips. Okay, now I have some sort of specific questions that people have asked me. Are you able to swim the breaststroke after total hip replacement? That's a very specific swimming stroke, And it is one where you're splaying out your legs. And so it is putting, your hip in a pretty extreme position, and you're, pushing against the water like that. So I can see why you'd have that question. It's funny, I kind of laugh because when I was much, much younger, I did one sprint distance triathlon. And I'm a horrible swimmer when I do freestyle, which is what everybody does when you're doing a triathlon. I feel like I'm drowning because I don't know. I'm a bad swimmer. So I did breaststroke because with breaststroke, you keep your head above the water the whole time. And I could swim breaststroke pretty good. I mean, I'm not as fast as the other guys doing freestyle, but that's not my main event in the triathlon. And, it was just for fun anyhow. So, anyhow, I just thought that was funny. But can I swim breaststroke? I was trying to think because I'm not such a good swimmer, I don't swim very often. I don't think I've gone swimming since my total hip replacement, at least not, to do breaststroke. So I don't see any reason why I couldn't do that, but I would be very, very cautious about resuming something like that. I would probably try other swimming strokes first. And then when I was ready to go into breaststroke, I would proceed very cautiously and very slowly over a period of weeks or maybe even months, because I could just see if you went gung ho at it too early in your recovery, that could cause problems. If you have more experience with returning to breaststroke after hip replacement, then please post a comment. I'd love to know from someone who has some more experience with that. When can you return to work? Okay, so I'm retired, fortunately for me, but I have interacted with, I don't know, probably hundreds of people who have asked that question and or returned to work, and what has worked and what has not worked for them. And here's the bottom line. You can't answer that question ahead of time, right? There are just too many factors. You just cannot know when and where you will be ready to return to work after a major surgery like total hip replacement. So, what is a person to do? Well, what I always recommend then is number one, take as much time off as you possibly can, right? And then number two, do your best to try and work something out with your employer, or if you're self employed, that's even better, where you can ease back into it, right? Don't say, oh, 3 weeks post op, I'm going to go back to work full time on a construction job. That is a recipe for disaster. Whatever your job is, even if it's sitting at a desk, your body is working overtime to heal all the damage internally. And even though you might look, pretty normal on the exterior, you'll find that everyday activities will completely exhaust you. So, what I always recommend is number two, try to ease back part time. So, if you can go back, less than an 8 hour day, or if you can go back a few days a week and then slowly ramp that up, I always figure it's much better to underpromise and overperform than if you overpromise and then there's a problem which can affect other people. It can affect your employer or your coworkers negatively if they're expecting you back at a certain time and you're unable to do that. So, that's my advice. And, I hope you'll take it, because I've seen people struggle who tried to go too aggressively too soon back to work. How do I avoid gaining weight during my recovery? I've addressed this earlier in the video, so I would say rewind and look for that section. But the short answer is don't starve yourself during your recovery. You need that fuel to heal. And I did put together a video, which you can see here, to help with weight loss. And I did this with my mom, who's 80 years old. So I know it works for people of any age. And this is stuff that I've been doing for over 20 or 25 years. Did you have knee pain pre-op, and was it resolved by the total hip replacement? Yes. I had pain in my groin. It radiated all the way down through my knee. And after my total hip replacement, I don't remember when during recovery, but definitely at some point there was no more knee pain, at least, not from that. What have you learned about yourself, or what has surprised you over these last 3 years? That's an interesting question. So I think a lot of it is related to the hip replacement, but also just life and aging in general. I am sort of surprised that I am as patient as I am. I'm not a patient person. And also persevering with chronic pain, because as I've mentioned, I've had this back pain now for close on 3 years, really surprises me. When I was younger, I'm sure I would have been just no pleasure to be around suffering with pain like that. But I guess I've come to accept that stuff as stoically as I can and still, interact with people in a positive way. So that surprised me. Um, let's see. Do you find you're taking on more and enjoying the hip and life more, or are you more cautious? And I would say both. Again, this is sort of aging related. I recognize that as I age, I can't do as many activities or to the extent that I used to. I know, like, if I engage in 2 hours of hiking one day, then I shouldn't go do 2 hours of volleyball the very next day. Certainly not the same day, because number one, it's exhausting. But more importantly, what normally happens now with me is, if I do too much of one activity, then I tend to get muscle spasms or knots in my muscles and things like that. And that seems to be increasing as I age. So I tend to do both. I do definitely appreciate having the ability to, still be fit and play volleyball. And especially the last year and a half, my two sons have been playing volleyball with me. That's, as a father, that's one of the greatest joys in life, to be able to enjoy activities like that with your kids. So in that vein, I wanted to mention something that I read in a book recently. It's the book Die with Zero, which is written by Bill Perkins, and you probably wouldn't expect to hear something like this in this book. But the book is not just about financial stuff. It's about how to get the most out of life, balancing finances and health and time, because things change. And what he talks about is that you don't experience a single death in your life. You actually experience many small deaths. And those are the times when you have to say goodbye and stop doing certain things, right? So there is a time, for example, now I don't run anymore. So that was a small death. There will be a time when I can't play volleyball anymore. That will be a small death to me. And it will actually be very hard for me to take. But I know it's going to happen. And it's going to happen before I go into a pine box, probably. I'd like to think that. This is kind of stupid and silly, but I always tell my buddies at volleyball, it's like, well, my plan is that, when I can no longer physically do this, I hope that they've evolved technology enough they can just transplant my brain into an android body, and then I'll be playing the best volleyball I ever have. I think it's highly unlikely at this stage, but, it's still kind of funny. Okay, the last question for today is, are you discovering a different side of yourself with the new hip? Not really. It's still me, just a little older and hopefully a little wiser. We've reached the end of my hip journey. Wait, that doesn't sound right. My hip journey will continue, but you've reached the end of this video. And this is my longest video by far. So if you made it this far, congratulations. I wish I had a gold star or something to give to you. I would really love to know how you're doing. So please connect with me some way, either by email, on my website, on Facebook, or whatever, and let me know how you're doing. I'd love to hear from you and wish you all the best in your hip journey.
It's your world and I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut to move your butt to.
Explore all the free resources and helpful information throughout your hip journey by joining the Pete's Hip Vlog community and subscribing to my YouTube channel, Pete's Hip Vlog. If you like my content, I hope you'll also check out and subscribe to my primary channel, Game of Life 411, where my goal is to help you win at the game of life, whether that means finance, family, fitness, or something else. And remember, you're in charge of your own health.